The Ohio Senate puts the brakes on anti-abortion bills.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Bill Cohen, State House correspondent for Ohio Public Radio. Brian Rothenberg, director of Progress Ohio, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
Two controversial bills with ties to the abortion issue appear to have met their end, at least for this legislative session. This week, Senate President Tom Niehaus blocked the so-called heartbeat bill from coming to a vote. That's the bill that would ban abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected that could come as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy. Senate supporters of the bill tried an end run around Niehaus, but the Senate president blocked that too. The other bill that will go nowhere in the Senate is the one that would have defunded Planned Parenthood. Laura Bischoff, first to the heartbeat bill. Why was Tom Niehaus so adamant that this bill did not come up for a vote in this lame duck session?
Well, I think that he agreed with Ohio Right to Life, which is the largest anti-abortion group in Ohio, in that there's some constitutional concerns, and it might put at risk as that if it became law and it was challenged and went through the courts, it would put at risk other victories that they have kind of chipped away at over the years. And so he wasn't convinced that this was the right move. And I think he also, kind of saw the election results and said, really we should be focusing on jobs and economy right now. We're not going to do this. And so he did this parliamentary procedure, and he was threatened with what's called a discharge petition, where 17 people from the floor could sign a petition to say we're going to move this right to a floor vote. And he said, oh yeah, well, we're going to move it back to the Rules and Reference Committee. It was sort of checkmate Niehaus. On Friday, the Faith to Action people called on the members of the legislature to bring it back out of Rules and Reference on New Year's Eve and do a vote then. I do not see that happening.
Mark, is this a fight the Republicans should be having right now?
No, and I'm pro-life, and this is really not about the pro-life cause. It's about whether or not you believe the theory that there's enough votes right now to overturn Roe versus Wade on the Supreme Court. And even though most constitutional scholars privately will concede that the foundation of Roe versus Wade is very tenuous, the fear is you send this case up to the Supremes, and there might be a majority to actually rewrite Roe on a more strong footing, which would, of course, go against exactly what pro-life people want. So it's not a very smart thing to move forward, even if you are pro-life, which, as I am.
That's the legal argument against not moving on this. Now, what about the political argument? There was a gender gap. Tom Niehaus said that Romney lost. We should look at that and focus on other things.
Yeah, it's easy to overstate what happened in the election. Remember, Mitt Romney won white women. Mitt Romney won married women. A much better argument for a racial gap than there is for a gender gap. Having said that, Ohioans want fixes on the economic front, and it's good government and good politics to focus on that.
But the problem is also there was an overwhelming difference nationally among women, especially single women and other women on these issues. And there was a real backlash in some of the Senate races around the country, in Indiana and down in Missouri, over candidates that were too extreme on the issue. And if you look on the balance of it, yeah, the legislature is controlled by Republicans, but more Democrats actually voted for Democratic candidates. More Democrats voted across the board in Ohio than Republicans in those races. So it's easy to overreach. And, kudos to Senator Niehaus. I used to work in the Senate. That was a move I haven't seen too often, and he knew his rules very well.
These two bills could come back conceivably next year in a new legislature, but I think there's a good chance they'll be introduced, but that they won't go anywhere. And one reason is John Kasich is running for re-election, and he really doesn't like these. He is anti-abortion, but he doesn't like these moral issues and side issues. As you say, he likes to focus on the money issues, the economy, and that's what he wants to run on. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's telling Republicans, in the back room, look, cool this abortion stuff. Let's just deal with the economy.
Laura, it doesn't sound like they're listening, though. Is there a chance that, the new Senate President, Keith Faber, is going to push this? He was one of the folks who tried to do the end run. He's not going to be in charge next year. This still could come to a vote in the Senate.
He said he was in favor of House Bill 125, which was the heartbeat bill. He also said he was not in favor of doing a discharge petition, yet at the same time, Senator Niehaus removed him from rules and reference along with Shannon Jones to make sure that it did not, pop back out again. I think that Keith Faber is more ideological than Tom Niehaus is, but maybe when he's the Senate president, he may find that it's a different role and he has to kind of walk more of a compromising line and work more, build more bridges. So we'll see. I do think Kelly Copeland, who's from NARAL Pro-Choice Ohio, said that this is an issue delayed, not defeated, that it is going to come back up again.
Well, this is just the latest chapter of what we see. Some elected officials in Ohio are focused on primary elections, Republicans and Democrats, mind you, and others are more worried about general election. And this shows the divide between those two groups.
Okay, we'll get to the redistricting in a moment, which is part of the reason for that. Republicans in Congress are trying to stay united in their opposition to tax increases, but some have said they plan to go against part or all of Grover Nordquist's No New Taxes pledge. Ohio Republicans in Congress seem to be sticking with Nordquist. Senator Rob Portman and Congressman Pat Tiberi and Steve Stivers say they will not support tax increases. Of course, federal taxes will rise and spending will be cut at the first of the year if Republicans and Democrats do not agree on a deficit reduction plan. Mark Weaver, post-election, are Republicans more willing to renege on the Nordquist pledge or soften on the Nordquist pledge?
First of all, I don't know any lawmakers who made any pledge to Grover Norquist. I do know some who pledged to America and their district that a government that's spending too much money and borrowing too much money shouldn't be raising taxes.
He printed the paper on which that pledge was.
Well, sure, but that doesn't mean the pledge is to him. These people are sent to Washington by their voters.
Yes.
And they're sent to Washington by voters who are paying, in some cases, 40, 50, 60% of their income when you count all the different taxes out there. They feel overtaxed. Now, whether the Republican Party ought to work with the White House to find a way to solve the fiscal cliff, I think every responsible legislator wants to do that. The question is, we've not had much talk on the cutting of the spending side. Remember, you could take every dollar of every millionaire in this country, take every dollar, not just tax them, and all the profits of the top 400 Fortune 400 companies, and you couldn't even pay for 7 months of the federal government to run. That's taking every dollar out there. So this is largely a spending problem, but the parties may have to find some way to work together.
This is a simple problem. It's who's going to pay for this? And when you take off the issue of extending the Bush tax cuts, and it's extending them, this is not a permanent thing. You're saying that the top 2% earners in this country are more important than the middle class folks in this country. And let me say that it's pretty obvious in this recovery and some of the slow recovery we've had that when you give money to people that put it into Wall Street, there's a Wall Street recovery. But as we learned in the 90s with Bill Clinton, when people spend money, your economy comes back. And so the first step is deal with the middle class issues. And quite frankly, who's going to pay? And I think that the problem that you're seeing in Congress right now is that the Republican leadership is starting out with this Norquist pledge where it's like, you know what, you guys are going to have to pay because we're protecting these guys.
And I think some of these Republicans, though, are hinting that they're willing to soften on this. For instance, getting rid of some loopholes that generally benefit the wealthy. And Terry Casey, often a panelist on this show, was telling me today, he's a Republican strategist, saying, well, maybe instead of increasing the rate 2 or 3 or 5 points, maybe only 1 or 2 points. So that's hinting there's some wiggle room there, even on this idea of taxing the rich.
Laura, Democrats, the indications are they don't want to see, at least like Harry Reid, and they're saying that they don't want to give up on entitlements. They don't want to see the Medicare age rise, the eligibility rise to like 66, 67 years old.
Well, it would be wildly unpopular,
yeah.
But I think that the thing is that the deficit problem is kind of like a diet. You got to exercise more and eat less if you want to lose weight and be fit. And it's the same way with the budget. You have to maybe put in more money through more revenues, however, whether you get it through deductions or through rate increases, and then you also have to make cuts. And neither side is all that appealing, but that's the situation we're in.
Now, one prominent economist said a couple years ago, we shouldn't raise taxes during tough economic times. It would hurt our economy. That economist, of course, was Barack Obama. He seems to have forgotten his own advice.
Well, no, that's not necessarily.
Well, that's exactly what he said.
Well, but
we shouldn't raise taxes in tough economic times. Ask any American whether this is tough economic times. They'd say it is.
Well, it's
we
less
shouldn't
tough
be raising
than
taxes.
it was when he said it.
Still pretty tough.
well, and he's also dealing with the cost of the war, and he's dealing with all these other costs, and he's trying to protect the programs that help people that are the most needy. And by the way, those programs, most economists right now say, if we let this thing go over the cliff, it's going to affect our economy in a major way. So that's not really
Is
fair.
everybody avoiding what really needs to be done is a tax increase that does affect the middle class? They all say that the taxes on the rich are as the highest point as they've been in a long, or as lowest point they've been in a long time, lower than they were when Clinton was in office. But middle class taxes are lower than they were when Clinton was in office, and we had a big boom. Are we going to see some increases that affect more than just the top 2%?
Well, even if Barack Obama gets his way with this tax, the people that are $250,000 income and above, that's only a tiny patch.
Yeah.
That's not the whole fix. And I think that Americans should be wary of that, because that does not fix the whole problem. There has to be a much broader approach to this, like changing the entitlement programs, making cuts, maybe having everybody pay a little more, or restructuring the tax code. There needs to be. The thing is, if we go over the fiscal cliff, everybody gets a tax increase, because the Bush-era tax cuts will lapse. So that means everybody gets the tax increase, and we have all these dramatic spending cuts. So, it's not a very appealing situation right now.
But we're going to have dramatic spending cuts no matter what. And as you hint, people aren't really thinking about that very much. So even if the Democrats do win more taxes on the rich,
and that's
yes.
the larger core problem. It's easy to forget that America is borrowing $20 billion a day just to stay dead even. And if you don't think about that, you don't realize how big the problem is. And most Americans, frankly, aren't focusing on it.
Okay. Back here in Columbus, the Kasich administration's jobs effort, his economic development effort, is out with new ads. Let's take a look.
No one starts out striving to be average. There are no parades for mediocrity, no monuments to empty suits. Here, what we celebrate is passion, innovation, action, and good old-fashioned hard work. In the past year alone, Ohio businesses have created more jobs than almost every other state in the country, and it's only the beginning. There are so many new success stories here in Ohio. Tell us yours at thriveinohio.com.
It's kind of funny. We did not see that ad before the November election, but nonetheless, even though John Kasich never appears in the ads and we never hear his voice in these ads, his potential opponent, Cuyahoga County Administrator Ed Fitzgerald, says the ad amounts to a Kasich re-election ad. Bill Cohen, how do you look at these ads? Are they promoting Ohio jobs and the growth that we've seen, or are they promoting the governor?
Well, I think they're mostly promoting Ohio and trying to get some buzz about Ohio, just changing the image. We're no longer the Rust Belt state. I think the biggest, most telling thing is the Columbus Dispatch did a story on this, and they quoted Christy Tanner, the CEO of Jobs Ohio. She said, "This type of paid advertising in support of job creation is consistent with what I helped lead under the Strickland administration, and it's also consistent with the work I saw as a development official under Taft and Voinovich." So she's been on all the administrations, and she's saying there's nothing, as you point out, Kasich is not in these ads. If he was, you could make a really strong case. This is a re-election ad, but he's not in here.
There is one thing that bolsters the Democrats' argument, and in some of the ads, the clock starts on the start of 2011, when John Kasich took office. Instead, the job growth began, though, in 2010 when Ted Strickland was in office. Does that lead to perhaps a little bit of a
I think the job creators knew that John Kasich was coming on board, and so that's when the optimism began. Now, I agree with Bill, is Ohio, look at Michigan. They have spent so much money advertising Michigan and getting buzz around Michigan. Ohio needs to do at least that much, because we all know we live here. We love this state. There's a great story to be told. There's nothing wrong with telling it.
But I will say one thing, though. The fact that these ads, a lot of them are running in Ohio, does bolster the argument, well, if you're trying to get other people to move into Ohio, well, then just run the ads elsewhere. Now, they are airing them, putting them on the Wall Street Journal and in Chicago, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, so there's some of that. But still, a lot of them are in Ohio. So, well, why are they running those?
This is, the real question here was Ed Fitzgerald wrong? And the answer is probably no. I don't care which governor did it in which past years. This is simply a feel-good ad. I'm not sure this does anything for job creation. I don't think a CEO is sitting there seeing this saying, I'm going to move to Ohio. I think the real problem here is that if we're going to be serious about job creation, we've got to start zeroing in on, okay, if we give money to a company to create the jobs, let's make sure they create the jobs. Let's try to have more clawback provisions. Let's try to have more stringent protections to make sure those dollars are being spent in the way they need to be. I think this is feel-good stuff. I don't care who the governor is. I don't think it's necessary.
Laura, they're good ads. I mean, they really are feel-good ads.
Yeah, they're very well done.
And they're very well done. They're positive. I mean, after especially all the negative ads for the past year, it's nice to have some positive ads on there. Could they be effective in convincing maybe an Ohio business person to have a little more confidence, to maybe invest a little more in his or her business?
Maybe tangentially, but I think that it's kind of very indirect. I agree with Bill. I think the telling thing is that they're placing it mostly in the Ohio market. So this is sort of an Ohio thing, and also they're putting out the call for they thrive in Ohio. How have you thrived in Ohio? Tell us your story. So I wonder what they're going to do with all that information. If they get people saying, "Hey, we expanded here, we did this or that," and then these little feel-good stories start showing up in later ads while the governor is running for re-election, that'll be really telling.
We get back to my original question, Mark. Why didn't these run before the election?
Well, my guess is all the ad time was bought up by the politicians. But if that had happened, then it would have been, look at Kasich trying to affect the election. So there's talking points no matter how he does it. The guy is trying to bring our state back, and if he does successfully, he'll be easily reelected, and I can understand why Democrats would be sore about that.
There is one ad I have to criticize a little bit. There's one ad, it's a 15-second ad, probably a web ad, where it's all robotics. And that, to me, if you're a manufacturer or someone looking for a job and you see just the robots putting stuff in things, it's high tech, but I didn't see one human in that ad. Anyway.
They were inside the robots.
Someone's going to control the robots. Anyway, in a split decision, the Ohio Supreme Court has upheld the state legislative maps drawn by Republicans last year. Democrats claim the maps for Ohio House and Ohio Senate were drawn primarily to favor Republicans, and they claim they violated the Ohio Constitution. While admitting that politics played a role in the map making, the majority justices said the Constitution does not demand political neutrality. Brian Rothenberg, you're a supporter of this effort to get the court to redraw the maps, or at least throw out the old ones. Right. I think a lot of folks thought that they might do that. Were you surprised that they didn't?
I mean, the makeup of the court, you would think it's stacked against you a little bit, but they've been, you haven't been able to predict them lately. In fact, I've been on the right side of, I think, one recently, indirectly. Here's the thing, though. I mean, this state is an evenly divided, purple at best state, and we have congressional districts and legislative districts that are so stacked that it is hard for anybody to have a competitive race. And that is driving all these people to pander to these primaries and start pushing all these social issues. And the system has let the people of Ohio down.
Should competitiveness, Mr. Attorney, be a factor here?
It is a factor, but it's one of the lowest factors. Listen, I remember in the mid-'90s, I was interviewed by a young radio reporter named Bill Cohen. And he asked me, Mark,
what's young in the mid-'90s?
He was. It's amazing. He said, what about this redistricting lawsuit? Because, of course, there was one then. And I think what I remember telling Bill was taking politics out of redistricting is like trying to take the tomato out of tomato soup. The entire process is political, and the voters control it when they send people to the apportionment board. So when they elect those folks, what they get is lines that will often favor the party that's in charge.
But the system could be made a lot more fair and a lot less partisan. But, for instance, Democrats who are complaining about the current system, Brian, your comments would have more credibility if, when the Democrats were in control, you would have also opposed the system.
Well, I personally did, but
okay,
yes,
but you
there
know
was
what I mean?
a,
Generally, only the party that's out of power complains how unfair the system is. When they're in power, they're drawing the lines, they love the system.
I was going to say, I disagree with Mark just a little bit. Sure, the voters hold the people accountable and decide the system when they send somebody to the apportionment board, but I bet you 95 out of 100 Ohioans cannot tell you what the apportionment board is, who's on the apportionment board, or how redistricting works.
I think that's right, but that goes more to voter not paying attention. But the system is built with checks and balances, and the ultimate check and balance is who the voters send to Columbus.
So what happens now? Because both sides in the issue 2, the issue that's lost that would have changed the process, both sides said that the system needs reforming. There was a reform effort by John Husted that Democrats rejected or didn't let go forward, the thing that Bill mentioned. Does that come forward now?
Yeah, I believe that there is going to be an effort to do that. I think that the real key issue now is going to be, will it be sooner rather than 2020? And I think that this setback means it's more likely not to happen until 2020.
Now's the time to do it.
But now's the time to do it.
And John Husted has been a voice of moderation, a voice of responsibility, sometimes angering his own party on this exact issue. He can now take the lead.
He wanted a supermajority, basically, of the apportionment board. So that would force one side or the other to get a vote from the other side to approve the map, thus forcing compromise. Why not just do that now and say it takes effect after the 2020 census? Would the legislature go for that, do you think?
Well, it's hard to know
Maybe.
what this legislature is going to do, but I do think the key is going to be to take the politics out of it now that this happened. And in a weird way, issue 2 actually might lead to change.
But unless both parties agree on the reform plan, when it goes on the ballot, it will lose because there will be somebody opposing it, telling people why they should vote no, and it's likely the proposal will be complex, hard to understand, which makes people vote no. So unless both parties agree on it, it has very little chance of passing.
That's true.
All right. Let's get to our final topic. Another thing dying in the lame duck session at the State House is an attempt to weaken Ohio's energy efficiency standards. Under the rules passed in 2008, utilities must reduce power consumption and increase efficiency each year until 2025. Utility companies complain the standards are too costly and they're hurting the economy. Environmentalists disagree. Bill Cohen, we're only 4 years into this 17-year process. Why are we trying to weaken them? Why are some trying to weaken them so soon?
Well, it's mostly FirstEnergy that's trying to weaken them. And they say, look, people are already buying energy-efficient appliances. Factories are already buying energy-efficient heating and cooling systems and assembly lines. There's no reason to hand them checks to incentivize them to do it and charge everybody extra money on their monthly electric bill to pay for the whole program. So they say, why don't at least we review it, soften it, maybe get rid of it. But they're really the only group out there that's pushing it. And the legislature, even Governor Kasich, a real pro-business, a Republican guy, his press secretary said, threw cold water on it, said, we should always keep in mind the cheapest and cleanest energy is the energy we don't need to use. So it doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere.
Does FirstEnergy have the backing of other utilities, AEP, other utilities around the state, or are they just going on their own?
They appear to be on their own for the most part on this, and quite frankly, I think it is, one of these issues where certain parts of the legislature are pushing it more because of their ties to that area or FirstEnergy areas and the influence of FirstEnergy.
Yeah, but there's an argument to be made here that's got nothing to do with FirstEnergy, which is government cannot mandate true efficiency. Look at the federal level. Congress says to automakers, you must make cars that get better mileage. You know what they did? They start putting spare tires in the car, and they give you these run flats because that lowers the weight and that gets you better mileage. So when you force things from the government side as opposed to letting the market do it, and many people do want to have better energy-saving devices, the market's a much better way to do it. It's not just FirstEnergy making that case.
We're seeing that now with natural gas. You see the shale prices coming down. Coal is more expensive now for utilities. You're seeing fewer and fewer, at least new coal-fired electric plants, and that's where the market is doing it rather than... Of course, the government plays a role, though, because they've tightened the rules on coal.
That's true.
And this new landscape is why FirstEnergy is able to argue, look, things have changed a lot in the last 4 years. Energy was very expensive before, and then natural gas is super cheap right now.
It does have a sticky point for the governor and for others because we have a huge industry making wind turbines in many of the parts for some of these efficient light bulbs and those types of things. And so it does have a job effect.
Okay, let's get to our weekly off-the-record parting shots. Mark Weaver, we'll start with you.
On the west side of Columbus, someone came up with a brilliant idea of placing 190 homeless adults next to a child care center. And without having bathrooms to serve these folks, they're going to put portable toilets in the parking lot. A judge in Franklin County will decide whether zoning requirements have been met. I predict that he will find that they have not been met.
Okay. Brian.
You know, the payday lenders are up to their old tricks in the banker's bill. They're trying to get a tax reduction for all of their money and their profits as a corporation, is my understanding. And I think that the Senate's probably going to throw it out.
Bill.
I think the governor has a good shot next year at getting legislators to approve his call to hike taxes on oil and gas drillers, because I think the industry is going to be booming so much they won't have to fear that a new tax is going to dampen the industry. But I think he's going to have to maybe, to get the votes, unlink that with his proposal to lower the state income tax.
And Laura.
Given that the debt ceiling debate back in mid-2011 really damaged the markets and hurt the U.S. credit rating, I think that we will see some sort of a deal on the fiscal cliff, but I think that we'll see the deal on Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve.
Because nobody wants to spend Christmas on the House floor.
The ultimate bargaining chip.
The ultimate bargaining chip. They got leverage then.
Let's get home for Christmas. I also predict that there will be another deal. I predict there will be a deal to save the NHL season. The negotiations are farther apart than the negotiations in Washington over the budget debt, but I think that the NHL and the players will come together and reach a deal and save the season. Let's hope anyway. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Let's check us out online. We are on Facebook. We're on Twitter. And you can connect to all of that at our website, wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.